Good morning, everyone. Janie here. Welcome back to my garden. I'm in my backyard and I'm over by my limelight hydrangeas, it's on the north side of my garden. I love my limelights. I love them. They're in between my honeysuckle and I just absolutely love this garden. One of the things I've been wanting to work on in this garden though is some ground cover for underneath the honeysuckle. I do have some bird feeders right above this plant and the birds of course are messy and they drop their seeds and then I get weeds underneath this hydrangea, especially in the winter when the hydrangeas have lost all their leaves and it gets a little bit more sun. So I've been thinking about what type of ground cover I wanted to put underneath here. And there's a lot of different things that I could do, but I think I have a feeling, I think I've finally nailed down what I want to put underneath here. So let me turn the camera around and I'll show you guys the area. So here's the spot that I'm talking about right here. So this is my honeysuckle growing on my trellis. This trellis was here when we moved in. We actually found receipts of the previous owners getting them installed. So based on the cost of the trellises, I think that they're very, very good quality. So we didn't do those, but I love them. They're absolutely gorgeous. And in between the honeysuckle, I've planted limelight hydrangeas. And it's just the type of planting that I'm so happy with and I'm so confident that I'm going to leave there that this is just a long-term planting for me. So now what I'm doing is I'm kind of just filling in around it and finishing off this area a little bit. In my backyard garden tour, I was talking about how I have some stuff over here on this side and I want to bring some stuff over here so it's more kind of like a softer line over here. One of you had a fantastic idea of moving these two pots over there. I don't know how they will do because this is a bougainvillea and this is a Meyer lemon tree and it doesn't get a ton of sun over there, but I am going to move them over, try them out, see how I like them over there, and then I might, change the plants to plants that can handle a little bit more shade. It's not full shade there and it actually gets hot afternoon sun from right behind the greenhouse, but I'll try it. I'll just see, I'll see what works. We did have some kids over swimming yesterday, so there's pool toys everywhere. But I do have, this is the bird feeders. I only have one up right now. Usually I have more, but they just haven't been eating because I'm sure there's tons of other good, yummy food all, in my front yard. There's tons of seeds from the flowers that they can eat. But usually I have a couple of them over here, and they make a mess underneath this limelight hydrangea. So I have mulch under there, and it looks fine now because the limelight is all fleshed out and I've put new mulch there. However, you can see there's one weed right there. So it does get quite a bit weedy and there's times where it's just like a mat of grass and mat of weeds. So I know I want a ground cover here. And at first I wanted some color, I wanted to find some colored blooms that would look really pretty. You can see it's pretty much full shade with the limelights and the honeysuckle. What I've actually decided on is I've decided on some lamium like I have in my front yard. I think it would be really pretty. I think it would bring some brightness, the silvery foliage of it. I think it will bring some brightness underneath there. And I think that the foliage will be really pretty when the limelights lose all their leaves in the winter. I think that it will bring some interest to this area. So let's go to my front yard. Okay, so here we are in my front yard. This is my crepe myrtle garden bed. You can see it's still blooming. It's not as strong as it was a couple weeks ago, but it'll still kind of flush in and out. It's an absolute mess. It's basically a pink carpet down here. I actually cleaned this up yesterday. I blew it all off and I swept up all the blooms and I filled up one of my whole pop-up bags filled with pink blooms. It's so beautiful. But this is how messy this crepe myrtle tree is. I don't care. It's totally worth it. Now, right here in this garden bed, this is where I have all my lamium, and it's so beautiful. It's gorgeous. I only bought a couple plants. This is only a couple plants. And then what I did last year is I propagated these. I took a bunch of cuttings from these and I put them in a tray and I let them grow, and then I kind of spread them all around. And so that kind of doubled the amount of lamium I have in this area. So what I want to do today, I have my propagating equipment out over here. I'm going to start taking cuttings, a bunch of cuttings of this lamium that I already have grow them inside because I have a grow light set up inside, cover them with a humidity dome, and then I'll have a bunch of free plants that I propagated. I wanted to show you all how I do it, just in case you have any questions. It's very, very easy, but it's such a wonderful thing to do, and it's free. So the thing I do want to say is that propagating from plant material is illegal to do it on trademark plants. And that was something I always had a question about. I never really knew exactly what that meant. But basically, if there is a plant that has a name, like Supertunia Vista Bubblegum or Superbina Sparkling Amethyst, those are trademark plants. And you are not allowed to propagate from plant material from those, just because the companies that have made those have put all the time and energy into making that plant, and they want you to buy their plant. However, if you have a generic plant that doesn't really have a name, like Lamium, you know, usually when you buy them at the garden center, and they're the cheap ones, and they're the ones that are like in the black cans, you know, just basic run-of-the-mill Lamium, those are totally fine to propagate. I think you can even sell them. I'm not interested in that. Watch Jim Putnam. He does tons of propagating. Actually, he is where I learned to do all my propagating. He had this series a couple years ago, and I was enthralled. I could not stop watching it. I'll try and find his series, and I'll link it down below. But he propagates for when he used to have a nursery. This is what he did as a job. So he was a professional teaching us all how to do it. So that is how I learned how to do all of this. And a lot of the plants in my garden I've propagated and I've gotten for free. So today I'm going to propagate the Lamium. It's going to take a couple weeks for them to root out and to grow so that I can plant them in the backyard, but I might as well get started doing it, and I might as well do tons of it, because whatever I have extra, I'll just put back in this crepe myrtle garden bed and expand the amount of Lamium that I have in this crepe myrtle garden bed. Okay, so let me go over the supplies that I have, and then we'll get started. Okay, so here's all the supplies that I am going to use for my propagation session. So first off, I have my snips, obviously. That's pretty straightforward. And then I have a tray. This is a 72 count tray that I normally use for seed starting. And I've filled it with pre-moistened seed starting mix. And I like seed starting mix. I've done it before with just straight potting soil, and that absolutely works. Some people like using straight perlite. Some people like using sand. I like using a soilless seed starting mix because I feel like it decreases the chance that my cuttings are going to get like fungus on them or any type of disease from potting soil. So perlite and sand would do the same thing. They would be sterile as well. But like I said, if all you have is potting soil, go ahead and use potting soil. That's fine. But you do have to remember that when you do propagation from cutting, it's not 100%. It's not a foolproof method. You could do, 100 cuttings and, maybe 20 will take, and you'll have a 20% success rate, right? And that's totally normal. And depending on what type of plants you're planning on propagating, some are easier than others to do it. Some take really well to propagating by cuttings. Some are really hard, and you might get 1 out of 100, and that's it. And you kind of just have to deal with it. It's an art. It's not a science. You cannot control every little thing. Sometimes you can do everything perfectly and a cutting just won't root, and that's it. You have to be okay with it. So I always do more than I need. I always do as many as I possibly can, and then even then I feel like I never do enough. So I do it a lot. That's why I use Dip and Grow. So Dip and Grow is a rooting concentrate. It will help cuttings. You can see right there. It will help cuttings root. It has some chemicals or stuff in it. Honestly, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it does, but it does help the cuttings root, and it helps them root from the nodes, which I'll show you guys that in a sec. There are lots of different versions of rooting concentrate. There's powders, there's gels. Some people like honey. I've actually never tried honey before, so I can't say that that's good or not. I like Dip and Grow because I heard that a lot of professionals like using Dip and Grow. And I think Jim Putnam uses Dip and Grow. Don't quote me on that, but I think he might. I just got this at my local garden center, and it comes with a concentrate bottle right here. This is what you get, and you pour a little bit into the cup right here. At the very bottom, there's a line that says the concentrate line. I don't think you guys can even see it. And then you dilute it, depending on whether you're doing soft cuttings or hard cuttings. But you can see how much you get out of a little bit of concentrate. So basically, you only have to use that much for your whole propagation session. And the more you do in one session, obviously, the better, because this doesn't last past, I think, 10 hours or something like that. Then you have to pour it out. So I use this stuff all the time. I really, really like it. It's not necessary. You can do propagation from cuttings and not use a rooting concentrate. I think it just takes your percentage of success down a little bit. I think that this ensures a little bit better success, but again, it's not 100%, so it's not necessary. So this is all the stuff I have, but I guess I want to emphasize to you all that you don't need all this. You can use regular potting soil. You can use a regular pot or a cup or whatever you have. You don't need concentrate. Really, all you need is the plant material and some scissors or some snips. So the pen I have right here, I'm just using this as a dibbler so that I can put a hole into my seed starting mix so I can put the cutting in. So let me show you guys how I do my cuttings. Okay, so here's all my lamium right here. All I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna take a piece off, right? So I just snipped it off. And then I'm gonna go from the bottom. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for nodes. A node is where the leaf attaches to the stem. So right there's a node and right there's a node. You need at least one node on the stem to propagate from cuttings for the roots to come out. I like using two personally because I think it gives you a better chance at having a successful cutting. So you can see on this piece, I'm just gonna go from the top because that's the easiest. If I go from the top and I count down, there's one node, there's two nodes. So I'm gonna go ahead and take my snips and I'm gonna cut right below the second one. And then I just like using my fingernails, but you can use snips as well. I just come through, okay, so there's one node where the roots are gonna come out, and then right here, there's the second node. All right, so this is what I'm going to dip into the rooting concentrate, and this is what's going to get buried beneath my seed starting mix into that hole that I just did with the dibbler. Then you come up to the leafy growth on top, and you have to think there's no roots on this cutting. So there's no roots to take in any moisture. So you want to make sure that you don't have too much leafy growth on top where it's going to evaporate all the water out. What I am going to do is I am going to put a humidity dome over all these, so it's going to help save some of the water from evaporating off of the leaves. But first thing what I want to do is I want to take off some of this leafy growth. You also want to take off, most times, you want to take off the tip. You want to take off the new growth of the plant because you're basically encouraging that plant, that cutting, to stop growing upwards and start making new roots down here. So I always pinch off the top. Then I always leave two leaves right there. And if they're really big leaves, what I'll do is I'll come in with my snips and I'll cut them in half. Okay, and so that just gives me less surface area for the cutting to evaporate the water, but it still has enough leafy growth that it's going to take in, it's going to photosynthesize and it's going to take in enough sunlight, or I should say grow lights inside. So what I'm left with is I'm actually left with 3 nodes right here. So what I can do is I can cut it here and have a really short rooting, or I can have a longer rooting. I think I'm going to cut it off just because I just have small 72 count cells and it's not going to be big enough, deep enough, I should say. So there's my final cutting. Then what I'll do is I'll take my dip and grow right here, and I'll just take the cutting in and I'll submerge the 2 nodes into the rooting concentrate, and then I count to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. And now I just take it over. Let me turn the camera. I just take it over here, put it in the soil. Make sure your hole is deep enough. put it in the soil and then make sure that those 2 nodes are covered with soil. One of the things I like to do is I like to make sure that the leafy growth isn't touching the soil, because that's going to be another source where it can get moldy or it can get fungus or anything like that. So this is actually perfect. I actually want to put a little bit more soil around it. This will give this plant enough room to root, but then it doesn't have this too much leafy growth where it's going to rot. Okay, so let me do that one more time for you all. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to cut off a piece, and then I'm going to come and I'm going to take off the leaves on the nodes until I have 2 nodes available. Okay, so there's 1. And don't drop it. Then I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to take off the new growth, which is going to encourage the plant to stop growing upwards and start rooting out. And then what I do, it doesn't matter if you leave this bottom piece, it doesn't matter where you cut it, but I think that this bottom piece, if I leave it, it's another chance where the plant material can rot. So I just come and I cut it off right below the bottom node. That also allows the plant to fit into my cells a little bit better, because the cells that I use are pretty shallow. Okay. And then here you can see on this one, there's actually a bloom on that one. You see that? You want to make sure there's no blooms or there's no buds on your cutting, because then the plant is going to put all its energy into blooming and not into creating roots. So if there's any buds, any blooms, you want to pinch those off. Then I come in with my snips and I cut off about half the leaves. I don't do this for everyone. I only do it if they have kind of big leaves. I leave some green material so that the plant can still photosynthesize, but I take off a lot of it so that it won't lose a lot of water in evaporation. Okay, so I'm going to take my Dip and Grow concentrate and I'm going to dunk the stem, the cutting in for 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then I'm going to take the cutting. I'm going to make a deeper hole because I didn't make a deep enough hole. I'm going to stick the cutting in, and then I'm going to pinch the soil around it. And again, I'm trying to get the soil away from the leaves. I'm just trying to get them not to touch as best as I can. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. And there you go. There's my second cutting. All right, so I will go through and I will make cuttings and I will fill this tray up, and then we'll take them inside and we'll put it under the grow lights. Okay, so all done. I brought it all back inside, washed my messy hands. It's crazy how messy your hands get from doing that. And then I'm just gonna spray the foliage with a spray bottle just to make sure that it stays nice and hydrated. After I do that, I'm just gonna take my humidity dome and cover it, and then we'll go put it under the grow lights. And that is it. That is it for propagating. That's my propagating session this morning. I just love doing it. It's very therapeutic for me because you actually have to sit there, you have to focus on every little leaf and count the nodes, and I just really enjoy doing it. So hopefully in a couple weeks I will have 72 new Lamium plants. I doubt that very seriously. I would be happy with 36 or 30, I don't know. I would be happy with some. So I will keep you guys updated on how they're doing. Again, I will go in and I will spray the foliage because there's no way for those leaves to get water from the soil because there's no roots yet. So just making sure that it's in a humid environment is super, super important. Making sure that it has enough sunlight, but not too much heat. You know, it's kind of hard. I find putting it under the grow lights is the easiest way for me to do it. I've done it outside in the shade. It doesn't work as well just because we get too hot here, but this is the way I do it. So I hope you all enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions in the comment section down below, and I hope you all have a chance to get into your garden today.